What is the origin of morality? We all know that there's evil all around us. We all know that we have a knowledge between right and wrong, good and evil. How do we explain that? Where does it come from? Right? Is it a part of the process of evolution? Is it through science? Is it through our society? Is it something that we create for ourselves? We need to look at this one closely, right? We know that things are wrong in this world, but how do we know this? How do we move forward? See, when we look at it, we know that there is the morality, but what is the origin of it in this broken world? See, when we look at the late, great Christopher Hitchens, in his book, God is Not Great, he said, we keep on being told that religion, whatever its imperfections, at least instills morality. On every side, there is a conclusive evidence that the contrary is the case, and that faith causes people to be more mean, more selfish, and perhaps, above all, more stupid. Right? So first off, you have to realize here, when we're talking about morality, we're talking about the origin of it, not what people have done. I will be the first to admit, a lot of people that say that they follow Christ have done some atrocious things. If you've been harmed by somebody like that, I apologize, but I want you to know that that's not Jesus. That's people saying they follow Jesus. Right? And if they are followers of Christ that have done something that is wrong, that is evil, we should expect that at some level. Right? We are in need of a Savior. That's why Jesus came. But when we're talking about this, we're not talking about whether or not Christians have done evil. They have, and they will. Right? We're talking about what is the origin of it. Let's look at what Matt Dillahunty said on his radio broadcast of the Atheist Experience. He says, I get my limits from rational consideration of the consequences of my actions. That's how I determine what's moral. I get it from a foundation that says that my actions have an effect on those people around me, and theirs have an effect on me. And if we're going to live cooperatively and share space, we have to recognize that impact. So he's saying that we have this knowledge of right and wrong, and if we're going to live together, we need to treat each other accordingly. Right? It's good for us. It's good for them. He goes on to say, he says, my freedom to swing my arm ends at their nose, and that I have no right to impose my will over someone else's will in that type of scenario. That's where I get them from. I get them, the morality, from understanding of reality, not an assertion of authority. Now, there's quite a bit of what he's saying here I agree with. Right? We don't have the right to harm others. We do need to get along. But here's the thing. When we're talking about the origin of morality, which Matt Dillahunty is talking about here, we have to realize that this doesn't explain the origin, does it? This explains the understanding. Where do we get this understanding from? If we look at Abhijit Neskar in his book, The God Parasite, he says morality does not come to this mortal world from some imaginary parasite or paradise. I can't even talk today, guys. I'm sorry. It rises from the neurons of mortal humans. He's saying that this knowledge of right and wrong, morality itself, is something our brain does. Okay, but let's look at what else he says here. He says morality exists in the neurons as a natural sensation. Religion only tries to codify it. Right? It's a natural sensation. It's been here. It's created, and he'll talk about it's created through the process of evolution, and this mindless process moving forward is how we got the knowledge of right and wrong. In another one of his books, The Illusion of Religion, he says, morality does not come from a book, it comes from the human mind. Once again, it comes from the mind. Now here's the thing, he's right. Morality does not come from a book. It doesn't come from the Bible. The Bible helps us understand morality better in certain ways. But we would never, as Christians, say, we should never say, that we get our morality from the Bible. right? It's been instilled within us. If we go and actually read the Bible, even Paul is saying that, right? That morality is something that is instilled within us. But what about the arguments of evolution, right? Doesn't evolution give rise? Well, there's a problem with this, and that is, number one, if it's through evolution, why would we trust it? If it's just a mindless process, if it's just atoms bumping into atoms, if it's an accidental instance that how we got our morality, why would we trust it? But furthermore, take this all the way. See, if we start looking at trees, right? And there's some amazing trees. This is a picture I took in Colorado. But here's another tree, right? A big, beautiful maple tree. Now look at this tree, right? If we were to look at it, it's got the wide swath of branches, right? They're evenly spaced. It's not putting extra strain on the trunk one way or another, providing lots of shade, right? It's a beautiful tree. It really is. But now if we're to start looking at some of these other trees, and there's a forest that all of the trees have this really weird curve to them. Right? There's different thoughts on why this is, but if we look at these trees, we see these trees aren't as appealing. Right? There's a lot of strain in those trunks. Some of them are sitting on the ground, so they're going to rot more. Right? If you look at them, you see how much of a curve there is, all that tension that's going to build up. Right? And now here you see a tree that has fallen. Right? Would we ever say that one tree is better than the other than your desires? Would we ever say that this tree did something wrong? Right? This one fell in the road. Would we ever say that this tree did something horrible? What happens if it falls on your vehicle? Right? You may be mad. Now you got to call and talk to your insurance company. It's going to cost you money. But would we ever say that that tree did something horribly wrong? Even if it fell on your house, would we ever say that that tree did something evil? We wouldn't, would we? The furthest we could go with that scenario through evolution is saying that we don't like what happened. You see, when we turn around and we start looking at this and we see things within nature, and when they happen in a way that we don't like it, that's the furthest we can go. We can't say that it did something evil. See, it's important to walk this through. Right? That we know for a fact that trees don't do evil, but if we are just here by the same blind process as it's claimed as a tree, then what we do isn't evil either. It's just something we happen to not like. Right? We've talked about this in our previous video. If you want to see more about that, go back and watch that. But I think you're starting to see what we mean here. Okay? But what about instinct? Right? We have this knowledge within us. We have this instinct within us that gives us this knowledge of right and wrong. You're right, absolutely, you do. Right? And that's why if you were to go out in the trees at night, like I like doing, we like going out for hikes in the day, but also hikes at night. There's just a different aspect to it. And a couple of years ago, my son and I went on a night hike, and we're walking out in the trees, and then we came to a prairie, right? And as we're walking in the prairie, as we're just kind of talking and looking up at the stars, all of a sudden we start hearing that. Now, if you're not aware what that is, and we weren't at the time, what that actually is it's a cougar that's crying out, right? And when we heard that, we had different instincts within us, right? We had the instinct to run and help because it sounds like a woman screaming. That's what it sounds like. We had this instinct to run and help. But, my computer's acting up here. We had this instinct to run and help, but we also had this instinct to run away, right? If all we are is instincts, right, nothing would make one instinct better than the other. See, See, when we heard that and it sounded like a woman, and we had this instinct to run and help, if we would have known that that was a woman, and we chose to do something else, if it's just instincts, it doesn't matter. If there's a morality behind the instincts, that changes everything. See, we know that if we hear a woman being beaten or a man being beaten, we should run and help. That's the better instinct, isn't it? Right? C.S. Lewis said it this way. He uses an analogy using a piano here, and he says, the moral law tells us the tune that we have to play. Our instincts are merely the keys. We often feel the need to stimulate our herd instinct, right? That's what he's calling it. We often feel this need when we have this instinct that we need to do something to cause one instinct to rise up above the others. He goes on to say, he says, but clearly we are not acting from instinct when we set about making an instinct stronger than it is. The thing that says your herd instinct is asleep cannot itself be the herd instinct. He's saying that the music that you look at on a piano, that's what's telling you what to play. That's different than the keys that you're playing. And then he relates this over to the instincts. Right? He's saying that whatever it is that's telling us that we have, a different instinct that needs, it's the right thing to do. That's what we need to move forward on. Even so, we may want to run away, right? You hear that scream, you may want to run away, but you know that moving forward is the right thing to do, to go and help. Right, but what Lewis is saying and what is true is whatever is going on, you having to build up that one instinct in order to move forward and do what is right is different than the instinct itself. Right? Our morality that we know that we have this knowledge within us can't just be the instinct. It has to be something outside the instinct. See, when we look at it, there's also a lot of different instincts that we have, and we would never say that one is always right or always wrong. There's definitely a difference here, right? When you look at violence, right, we would never say to do violence is always wrong. Right? If I were just to walk out and start, beating up on someone, that's obviously wrong. But if they come and break our door down and try to harm my wife and kids, you better believe I'm going to step up and stop it. There's a right and wrong time to use violence. That's an instinct. Sometimes it needs to be quelched. Sometimes it needs to be built up. What about lying? Right? Of course, we shouldn't be liars, but there's times where we do and where we should. Right? We see in Scripture where that's even praise, right? Lying to protect the men that are there watching over the kingdom, trying to see what lies ahead. Lying to protect them was a good thing. When you've got people protecting the Jews, lying to save them from the Germans is a good thing. Right? Lying to get out of doing certain duties is a bad thing. The same instinct. There's something behind it telling us which one we should do. That's morality. Right? What about patriotism? I'm a pretty patriotic person. I love our country, the United States. Right? But even when we look at patriotism, there is times where patriotism is good and there's times where it's bad. Right? Standing pride, with a righteous pride in our country and what amazing people have done and what God has blessed us with so we can move forward is an amazing thing. If you're having pride in Nazi Germany, that's a pretty bad thing. Your patriotism is wrong. What about sex? Right? It's a good instinct at times. It's a bad instinct at times. You see what I'm getting at here? It has to be something beyond the instinct. Right? That's why we need to build up certain instincts. That's why we need to quelch certain instincts. There has to be something outside of the instinct that gives rise to our moral understanding. What about society or the majority of people? That's how we come up with our moral understanding, is whatever society dictates. Well, there's a lot of big problems with this. The first one is, whose society are we talking about here? Are we talking about, Nazi Germany society? Nuremberg trials, the crime trials after World War II. They tried claiming, well, it was our society, it was our country. We determined that murdering all these millions of people was an okay thing. It was justified. And the world says no, right? You don't get your morals from your society. See, if we're to look at it, if we're going to say society is what gives rise to our morals, then when we've got other countries doing wrong things, we just have to say, well, that's their society. Right? We have no right to say what's right and wrong in their society. That also means that when you take and get on an airplane and you go to a different country, right, that whatever they are saying, that's morally right inside that society. So if you step into that society, that's what you need to do, right? But we would never say that, would we? The other thing is when we look at it, what is a society? What's defining a society? See, when we look at the society that I'm in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, is very different than the society that you stand in with some of the different thought processes in California, right? There's differences there. Right? I'm in a little bit of a different type of society than my teenage kids. I'm in a different society than my, my 4-year-old and 2-year-old nephews. Right? What defines the society? If you're going to say that morality is what dictates, or society is what dictates your morality, you need to be able to define it. But it comes from outside of that. What about the fact that societies are changing, right? And visiting societies like we talked about, but societies changing. Now think about it. If you're going to say that society gives you your morality, then doing something going against society is wrong. You go back to the atrocities that have been done in our country with slavery. Those that fought against the society, those that rose up and said that was wrong. If you're going to say that you get your society, you get your morals from society, what those brave men and women did were wrong when they rose up against their society and said that slavery was evil. See, instead what we know is slavery has always been evil, whether or not the society realized it or was willing to admit it at the time. We know that throwing people in ovens and gas chambers are wrong all the time, no matter what the society tries to say. Right? Well, what about the government dictates your morals? What about tradition dictates your morals? Your experience dictates your morals. They all fall for the same reasons. We know that our morals don't come from those. Those are always changing, right? And if you rise up against them, all those same reasons we've already given, right, for society, cross right over into those as well. Okay, what about science? Science dictates our morality. Now here's the thing. Science can tell you what some of the outcomes are going to be. Right? Science can tell you that if you eat certain things, it might help you, it might kill you. If you use science, you can discover what happens when you make an atomic bomb and drop it on people. But it can't tell you whether you should or should not do it. Right? That's the difference here. Society can help you discover things, but it can't tell you what to do with them. Here's an example. There's a well-known chef over in the UK. And several years ago on a TV show that he took and he cooked up a mystery meal and he fed it to a family, a husband and wife. And I think there's a couple kids there, but the wife had just given birth. And they sat there eating this mystery meal, and the wife didn't really like it, and the husband had a whole bunch of helpings. I think it was like 17 helpings. Now science could turn around and tell them, what the different components of that meal were and how it could help or harm their bodies. Okay, but science couldn't tell you whether you should or should not take and secretly take the placenta from the woman that had just given birth, cook it and feed it to them. That's what this gentleman did. right? That's the difference here. Science can tell you certain things about stuff, but whether or not you should do stuff comes from your moral instinct, your moral ability that comes from outside of yourself. It's been given to us. That's the only way we can explain that we all have the moral understanding. Right? Yes, we've got prejudices that help us rise up above. We've got ignorances that help us not understand. But we have this ability to know things. Right? There may be aspects that are foreign to us. There may be things we haven't thought all the way through. We may not understand every aspect, but we do have this knowledge of right and wrong, good and evil. Right? There's things that we know are absolutely right and wrong. Things that are absolutely harmful and atrocities should be avoided. Okay? But maybe we get them just from ourselves. Right? Maybe that's where we get our morals, is we just we have them within, but we just kind of think things through and create them on our own, and we each kind of determine what's right and wrong for each other. Well, there's a lot of problems with that, and we've talked about some of them before, but let's look at a couple now. See, when we look at it, here is a speed regulating sign from the Autobahn. Right? There is no absolute speed limit, but they will ticket you in certain areas. In other areas, there's no speed limit at all. Now, in our area, there is a speed limit, right? Average speed limit, 55 in our area. Okay? Now, in the street near us, it's actually 35. Now, if you are speeding on the Autobahn, since there is no speed limit in certain areas, you're not breaking the law, are you? Okay, but now if you're doing 55 in the 35 near us, you're breaking the law, right? You're breaking the man-made law of that speed limit. Now here's the thing. Do you get guilt from that? You don't, do you? You don't get guilt from breaking a man-made law unless it aligns with a God-given law, a moral law. See, there's reasons why speed limits are made, okay? But you don't get guilty if you break it. You do get guilty if you kill someone doing it or harm someone doing it. That's the difference here. See, that's the difference between a law that has been created by a person breaking that law versus breaking a law that's been created and instilled within us. Now here's the thing. If all laws are just created by the self, by the person, that means that you, right there, watching on your computer, watching on your phone, whatever, you could have completely different morals than I can, and I couldn't say anything about it. That means that when someone rises up and kills someone else, all we can turn around and say is we don't like it. Right? If it's evolution, all we can say is they're less evolved than the other. Right? That's the furthest we can go if we're going to say we get our morals from evolution. We get our morals from ourselves. But we know there's more to that than that. Right? We know that there's something beyond. We know that things are right and wrong. We know that there's things that are evil. Without the shadow of a doubt, we know there's things that are evil. See, we know that morality has an origin. And we know that it can't be explained by the things we've talked about today. Right? We know things are absolutely right and wrong. And we know that when we turn on and we look at this and we investigate further, that none of these other things can explain morality. Like I said before, the furthest we could go is saying that we don't like that. We don't prefer that. But when someone rapes and murders a woman, we know that's wrong. We know that's a lot more than simply a preference. We also know that the only way we could actually move forward here, the only way that we could say that things are absolutely right and wrong is if there's something outside of us, something governing over all of us, putting us all in the same boat, all with the same knowledge. right? If it's evolution, then we could say that one person is less evolved than the other. But we don't say that, do we? No, we've got judicial systems. Because we know that we're all in the same boat here. We're all on the same level here. See, when we look at it, the only way that this makes sense is this way we have a creator outside of ourselves that has instilled that within us. So are there atrocities that are done in our world? Absolutely. Are there atrocities that are done in our world by people that call themselves followers of Christ? Absolutely. Are there atrocities done in this world by people that devote their lives to following Christ? Absolutely. And the only way that we all know this is if there is a God, an absolute creator outside of us. I hope this has helped you. We'll go through this a little bit more in depth at a later date, I'm sure. But this is what we do here. We take and we look at these deeper questions. We bring them out of the shadows and into the light here at Shadowless Apologetics. Thank you, and God bless.